Oh, hello. Welcome to the Curious Emporium. Have a look at what we have in store for you.
All right, let's dive into one of the most audacious, embarrassing, and frankly just plain bizarre journalistic scandals of the entire 20th century. This is a story about forgery, about obsession, and a lie so massive it literally captivated the world right before it blew up in spectacular fashion. So, picture this. It's April 1983. The super-respected West German magazine Stern drops this cover on newsstands. The headline, Hitler's Diaries Discovered. And I mean, this wasn't just some catchy headline. This was a bombshell, a claim so huge it promised to rewrite the history books. And the story they told was pure Hollywood. These diaries, they claimed, were part of the secret stash of documents that had been recovered from a plane crash in East Germany way back in 1945. And we're not talking about a few notes here, we're talking 60 secret volumes of Hitler's private innermost thoughts. You can just imagine, right? The world's media absolutely lost its mind. So that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? How does a lie this enormous get sold to seasoned editors, to historians, to reporters all around the globe? How does it go from being a wild claim to a massive international headline? Well, to really get it, you got to understand the people who are pulling the strings. You know, this whole incredible, sprawling story really just boils down to two guys, two central characters. You've got this charismatic con artist, and you've got a respected reporter whose own obsession made him the perfect target.
So, on one side, you have Konrad Kujau. He's this petty criminal and art dealer who kind of idolized Hitler and made his living forging Nazi memorabilia. Then, on the other side, there's Gerd Heidemann. He's a star reporter for Stern, nicknamed the Bloodhound because he was so tenacious. But he was also dangerously obsessed with the Nazi era. And maybe most importantly, he was in some serious financial trouble. So you have a forger looking for a huge payday and a believer who is desperate for the scoop of a lifetime. It's a perfect storm.
And here they are. This is the partnership that made the whole thing possible. The forger, Konrad Kujau, and the journalist, Gerd Heidemann. One guy created the lie, the other one sold it, and together they were about to pull off a multi-million-dollar fraud that would fool just about everyone.
So how in the world did Heidemann get his bosses at Stern to buy this story? Well, it was this wild mix of his own reputation, Kujau's super elaborate backstory about the plane crash, and this really powerful, overwhelming desire for the story to just be true. And of course, a whole lot of money.
Let's talk about the money, because wow, the final price tag came out to 9.3 million Deutschmarks. That's over 3.7 million US dollars back in 1983. Stern magazine basically bet the house on these diaries. They invested so much that it created this powerful psychological trap. At that point, they couldn't afford for them to be fake.
But here's the most astounding part. The forgeries themselves were, well, almost a joke. Kujau wasn't some kind of master forger. He used cheap notebooks he bought in East Berlin. The initials on the cover, they were modern plastic letters from a department store. And he even got them wrong. He put FH instead of AH for Adolf Hitler. For the content, he literally just copied passages from history books, spilled tea on the pages, and banged them on his desk to make them look old. It was laughably crude. I mean, looking back, the warning signs were everywhere. The red flags were just screaming at them. The whole deal was wrapped in this intense secrecy, even from other people at Stern. They were paying the forger per diary, which of course just encouraged him to crank out more and more of them. And the big one, they never did a proper forensic analysis before handing over millions. At one point, a former SS officer pointed out some factual errors in the diaries, and he was just completely ignored.
So the deal is done, millions have been spent, and Stern organizes this huge press conference on April 25, 1983 to announce their historic discovery to the world. This was supposed to be their victory lap, their moment of triumph. Instead, it turned into an absolute public train wreck.
Now, to make this all seem totally legit, Stern had hired this renowned British historian, Hugh Trevor Roper, to authenticate the diaries. And at first, he did. He wrote in the Times that he was satisfied they were genuine. This was the big seal of approval they desperately needed. But then, by the time the actual press conference rolled around, Trevor Roper had started to have some serious doubts. In front of all the world's media, he gets up there and does a complete 180. He publicly questions the diaries and slams Stern for sacrificing real verification just to get a scoop. You could have heard a pin drop. The whole foundation of their story was just crumbling in real time. And just when you thought it couldn't get any crazier, total chaos erupts. This author, David Irving, grabs the microphone, calls the diaries fakes, and starts demanding to know if the ink has been tested. Security had to literally drag him out of there while he was just shouting, "Ink! Ink!" at the top of his lungs. The press conference just descended into a brawl. The scoop of the century was now officially a public relations disaster.
Irving's shouting about the ink? Well, turns out he was onto something. With the story now in absolute tatters, Stern was finally forced to do the one thing it should have done from the very beginning: send the diaries for some actual, rigorous scientific testing. And the results? They weren't just bad. They were game over.
The forensic results were just devastating. Every single claim they made fell apart under the microscope. The paper, it contained chemical whiteners that didn't even exist before the war was over. The bindings used polyester threads that weren't invented until 1953. The ink was modern. Tests showed it had been written within the last 2 years. And the handwriting experts? They called the signature a terrible rendition. The diaries weren't just forgeries. They were bad forgeries.
So the hoax is busted. The lie is out in the open. What came next was a reckoning. For the forger, for the journalist, for the magazine, and really for the entire media industry. And the fallout was massive, you guys. Kujau and Heidemann both went to prison for over 4 years. The top editors at Stern were fired. The historian, Hugh Trevor Roper, his reputation was, quote, permanently besmirched. It took Stern magazine a full decade to rebuild its credibility, and the whole scandal forced newsrooms all over the world to put in much stricter fact-checking rules.
But it all comes back to that one big question. Why? How did so many smart people fall for such a clumsy hoax? This quote from a journalist at the Sunday Times, which was another paper that bought into it, really just nails it. The story was just too good to be true. It was so tempting, so monumental, that the desire for it to be real completely steamrolled the professional skepticism that should have stopped it dead in its tracks.
Ultimately, this whole thing was a perfect storm of greed, personal ambition, and just plain old wishful thinking. It's such a stark reminder of how easily any of us can be fooled when a story seems to confirm exactly what we want to believe. This all happened back in 1983, but when you look at our media landscape today, you have to ask the question, are we really any less vulnerable?